Well, let's discuss this now, and we speak to author and African affairs commentator Joseph Ochieno, who talks to us from Uganda, the capital, Kampala, this evening. Mr. Ochieno, good evening to you, and thank you for your time. I want to pick up on what the South African minister has had to say about this particular meeting, and in part, what he seems to highlight is that what this engagement has done is to enhance channels for frequent and continuous engagement at diplomatic levels. What does that tell us about the period before this meeting? Were there any kinds of engagements between the two countries?
I was thinking about that, that, and it would be surprising, isn't it, that these are two neighbors. These are two countries with a very, very specifically strong and emotive history. These are countries that are led by, if you like, immediate post-liberation political parties, and you'd expect them to be having much more cordial relationships. But with South Africa as the biggest country in that region, you would expect that leading to the elections in Zimbabwe, you would have expected slightly much more proactive actions by the authorities in South Africa, and we're not saying that they haven't been. It is possibly the case that post-elections and post-the-elections reactions by particularly the opposition, in this case, Podemo, the new opposition political party, under their leader, who has been rather strong on their points. It may be something new that all along, I think even the Mozambicans were used to Renamo and Renamo's ways, but Renamo was swept out. And of course, the narrative around Renamo is possibly also an emotive response that beyond SADC, even those of us who are neighbors of SADC and who are experienced in the liberation history of that sub-region, maybe we may not be taking it as strongly as we are taking it today. So maybe they've been taken by surprise. But I hope, whatever it is the case, that we start the new week leading to Christmas, but we start the new week with the resolution in Mozambique that whatever it is not really bloodshed, and it's not bloodbath, but it's a resolution that leads Mozambique towards the direction in which there can be harmony and there can be a new start. That country suffered hugely, just like did Angola. And those two countries suffered hugely, so just like South Africa in its own ways, but particularly Mozambique and Angola, including the death of Samora Machel at the time when we were struggling for the liberation struggles in those countries, and when some of us were relatively young people. One of my sad feeling before coming on air was that really, why should this be the conversation we're having? Why should it really not be a post-election story of Botswana in terms of the peaceful transition, not the shock, but rather certainly the one of SWAPO, where we are excited that a woman is new and there. But certainly, why not the one in Ghana, where election took place the other day, and one of my friends who's a senior observer there says that within 24 hours, it's almost like perfect business as usual. And yet governments changed, and yet political parties also changed.
Talking about that, I'm going to get into politics in a moment. Whilst we deal with the cross-border issues, it would seem that the real worry is around food security and, in particular, the actual safety of people itself. Why am I saying this? There's a line in the statement that should the situation persist, there is great danger of food and energy insecurity. We are expecting on the 23rd of December, the Constitutional Council of Mozambique to make a pronouncement. Whichever way this goes, are you apprehensive about this situation possibly getting completely out of hand?
It is actually about that the 23rd of December ruling, which I was referring to, but not naming by name. And it's almost certainly the case that the authorities, from their tone, might appear that they know the direction the whole thing is going to take. And of course they do, don't they? And almost certainly the case that they're concerned about likely consequences. Yes, I think it may be about food security, but my suspicion is actually beyond that. It may also be about whether or not, if things escalate, and then there will really be a flood of, in immigration terms, we don't like those words. Yeah, if you like, a swamp of people possibly trying to compromise the traditional borders of the two countries. But with that also, possibly, if it happens in a manner in which the position is threatening, it comes with its own sense of insecurity, considering the fact that Mozambique shocked me, amongst many other people, that I least expected the kind of rebellion and the tone of rebellion, and, if you like, being infiltrated by, if you like, Islamic-related forces in that country. So, yes, South Africa should be greatly concerned, and quite rightly so. My own view would be that, well, South Africa ought to have been doing slightly much more politically as the big brother in terms of the whipping process to make sure that, well, Mozambique does not go through this. My message really is this, that, look, what is it that this day and age we could be having conversations about post-elections where 2 months later we haven't resolved an electoral impasse? And what is it that it should lead us, South Africa, to a situation in which it's a matter of life and death? And what is it really that liberation parties and governing liberation political parties do not learn, so that we're able to make sure that, well, if we liberated these countries and we're able to be elected, we should be able to build foundations in which, even in the event that we win, we should win with confidence. And in the unlikely event that we lose, that we should have the confidence to say that, well, we fought imperialists and all those kind of forces and won and governed. It is actually possible for us, if we lose elections, in the event that we're able to lose elections, to also have the guarantee that this is our country, and these are our countries, and this is our continent, that we're able to stay around and hang around and go back to the drawing board and try again back in the next 5 years. What is it? And I think for countries like Mozambique, that question is important. And I really hope that one in which we're able to have an answer by end of next week.
It would seem that South Africa is not the only country that is worried about a powder keg situation that could erupt in Mozambique. An admission yesterday on this show by a representative from the South African Government Foreign Office that they have been meeting with their U.S. intelligence counterparts. They are in the country and having landed on a military plane in the province of Mpumalanga. We then read press reports that in Botswana, it is suggested that the United Kingdom may have landed its own military plane in that country. In a way, does this tell us that evacuation processes are possibly being put in place by countries whose citizens are in Mozambique, and the quicker this is put in place, the better?
That is a clear possibility, but it's also an extremely worrying possibility, and that's why I suggested, as I so did. If then that is a likely possibility, then we are saying, why is it then, as a continent, are we failing this much? And why is it that SADC of the regional blockings, I'm from East Africa and I've been around some of these things. As I said, SADC was the last of our liberation front lines was focused on the liberation of Mozambique, Angola, South Africa, and Namibia particularly. And it cost us in Uganda, Idi Amin, and it cost me, my governing political party, Uganda People's Congress, of Milton Obote, that you guys these days hardly hear about, or hardly know about. Then some of the youngsters, as students, one of my first demonstrations in Makerere University was against Mr. Museveni's regime when Samora Machel had been killed. Quite clearly, Machel was killed, assassinated, and we believed that the then Museveni authorities were slow to responding to the then apartheid regimes. The legalistic issue was quite clear. Apartheid assassination of Samora Machel. I'm saying we are coming from a space where, if we look back to 40 years, we should not be going through this. What is it that we are failing badly? And then, ironically, If it is, and I thought that was coming from you, the question of the U.S. presence in South Africa, isn't it ironical that it's actually the U.S. is an ideological conversation, and strategic, and actually a topic that I'm not quite sure whether I'm comfortable with this evening on the question of imperialism and global power and power interests. Some of our founding parents would be quite uncomfortable in their resting places in heaven. That now the U.S. comes in through South Africa. Is it to intervene, or is it to merely evacuate its citizens? Or is it that is about the interest of oil and gas in that country and this sub-region? Because remember, the destabilizing forces against the liberation struggles in South Africa were predominantly the West. The guys who actually believed that apartheid was okay, possibly the Bible endorsed it, it was basically those countries. Those countries are possibly today enjoying. How immediately after independence of these countries were not able to consolidate from an ideological perspective and to consolidate their independence and to translate their political power into benefits of the citizens of their country, and so therefore be confident enough to say that when we go to the ballot boxes, we're able to prove, on the table what Milton used to call the balance sheet, present our balance sheet that what we have done in the last 4 or indeed 5 years, or perhaps this is what we've done in the last 20 years, and at your own merit, at your own risk, if you lost out on this. Is it that? Is it fear, or what is it? Or is it the extremes of impunity, where then when we govern, we forget where we're coming from and we begin to whip our citizens? And so when election comes, we fear letting go. It is quiet in Botswana. I just talked about the case particularly in Ghana too, where the extremes in terms of power actually change and governments change. Why is it quiet there? Why couldn't it be in Mozambique? We are being speculative here and possibly being very unfair to the Mozambican ruling Frelimo party, who would be my sister party anyway, because we don't know what the outcome of that is, and there's no reason why we don't assume therefore that they genuinely clearly won those elections. But if so, why would it take 2 years for us, 2 months for us to have such an impasse? The people who are laughing are those Boer friends, including those ones of Zimbabwe, the Ian Smiths of those days, who say that we Africans were absolutely incapable of governing ourselves. And if we're given the right to govern, if government was handed over to us, the African majority, that we'll be seeing the kind of things that maybe we are discussing today. And so I feel a little bit embarrassed tonight.
Yeah. Joseph Ochieno, let's leave the conversation there, and as we await the date of 23rd December, and that's when the pronouncement from the Mozambican Constitutional Council is going to come. Thank you very much for your time and insights. African commentator, or African affairs commentator and author as well. All right.